we are in a slow pandemic. People don't understand it because unlike Corona, you cannot see what is happening. Large enterprises are actually spending nearly $100 billion to keep up with this compliance cost. They claim that they had no emission, right? They are a zero emission company. And I told them it's not possible. You cannot manage what you cannot measure. For the first time, they are able to see what is their negative impact.
Welcome back to the So Good to Grow Good podcast, the show where we explore how changemakers and innovators are building sustainable systems for a better future. I'm your host, John Kane Gonzalez, an entrepreneur fascinated by how mission-driven leaders turn ideas into real scalable impact. Today's guest is Abhinav Kaushal, founder and CEO of Zero Carbon One, a climate tech platform automating ESG reporting and decarbonization for enterprises across 6 continents. With 24 years of experience scaling operations at companies like Paytm, HDFC Bank, and India Mart, Abhinav has made a bold leap to bootstrap his own ventures. And in just 18 months, he's built a team of 27 and reached nearly $500,000 annual revenue. He's also been selected for the prestigious T-Hub Sustainability Cohort, chosen from over 220 applicants. In our conversation, Abhinav shares how he's bringing AI and blockchain to the climate compliance, what it takes to bootstrap a deep tech climate company without VC funding, and his unique perspective on building global self-innovation for global North impact. Let's dive in. Welcome, Abhinav.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John. It's my pleasure to be on your show.
I'm really excited to have you as well. There is a lot that you've done in the last in the period of your career, and a lot of it is very interesting to me. But for our audience, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you come into this scene?
Yeah, so I would say it's a pretty interesting story. And actually, I started my career from a dot-com bust era in during those 2000s, right? And when I started, from there, I had a really good fascination about, internet, because not many people said, hey, look, this is a passing fad and it's going to go off. So the real world is not internet. But I had a deep, feeling that technology, as we grow into various decades, would come and, become more and more stronger. Uh, so stating that, I started on the dot-com bust era and then, moved on to a banking in terms of mod processing, but my heart was always in the technology space. But I would say I got a really good perspective in terms of how the entire, uh, you know, uh, uh, a structured industry like banking works. And later in my journey, I was working with startups, working out of really garages and 3 bedroom, 3 BHK houses in terms of building other startup. So I learned that how technology is a great enabler which can make a small startup compete with large enterprises. And that's where I started to go deep into it, in terms of first acting as a mentor, bringing in my experience on the tables to kind of help other entrepreneurs understand that what they are doing, how could I help them with my experience in terms of management, marketing, and things like that. And then I did some part of angel investment in some of the startups, and thereby I was kind of preparing myself to get ready to become an entrepreneur. And I saw this climate as a space which made a lot of sense to me as an entrepreneur, because when it succeeds, you are actually giving back to the planet, which is the biggest satisfaction. And second part is that I also saw a lot of business sense in this. Being a banker, I understand that what regulations could bring to the table. And being a technology guy and later part of my career, I also realized that how technology can really scale this and take it to a global level. So that's the thing that I was kind of contemplating for a couple of years, and as it was going year on year deep down, I was getting more and more convinced that climate related solutions and planet related solutions are here to stay, and this is the right opportunity to build something in this space.
That's quite the journey, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean it's been, yeah, because one of the things that when I was earlier researching about this climate space before venturing into this was the trust factor, because a lot of claims were happening all across the world without actually getting into deep into so things like we are planting trees, or we are doing A, we are doing B, without having a traceability factor. And that's where I thought that technology can play such a big role to bring a transparency into what the large enterprise or anybody is doing, from a regulatory side as well as this thing. So I thought, it's a very, very good scenario where if we could have something, which is not only theoretical or consultative in terms of its approach, but also technology driven, which could, add a real impact. So I could, I would say I brought my 24 experience, of banking and technology to the table.
I mean, yeah, it definitely sounds like it. So while we're on that topic, why don't you explain a little bit about what zero carbon one is and how it helps?
Yeah. So basically, what we have built, and just to kind of share that, before, starting this, I also, kind of spoke to a couple of CEO friends, and with reference more people in terms of sample size, in terms of asking them that what does climate mean to you as a organization head or as a CEO, right, into various sectors, and I got variety of answers that things like it's good but not mandatory. It's a cost center. The things are changing, evolving. But one of the consensus that I found was that, people wanted something which can do multiple things at one go, because the climate as a space itself is, so many services. There is ESG, there is carbon accounting, there is carbon credits, then there is some kind of ratings, this, that. So the people, the CEOs, the management was overwhelmed by the kind of steps they would have to take, which would mean, putting a lot of people into place and, doing this. So they wanted to have a system which could, kind of at least do multitasking and, synchronize their operations. And that is where, we built Zero Carbon One. In terms of, we have created an integrated platform. What it does, it right from your source of where your materials or your factory floor work is happening to your final ESG reporting. There are various stages that each enterprise or corporate goes through, and we have got each of these layers and stages inbuilt into our platform. So essentially what it means is, it means that you start at the right beginning, and what you get at the end of the day is a complete automated solution, which is basically integrated with one another. So just to give you a little perspective into this, some of the large enterprises are actually spending nearly $100 billion to keep up with this compliance cost, because there are multiple consultants, multiple software providers, multiple stakeholders, and hence the cost is high. What we have done at Zero Carbon One, have kind of got all these things into one platform. So it's a layered service. You can go full stack and take right from the cradle to grave kind of an approach that we say in climate, or you can take some of these services in terms of, let's say, you want to do a climate impact on your business locations. So you can pick and choose. So what we have built is, we have built an integrated platform which can help you with ESG, carbon accounting, climate changes, and everything that you can imagine from an LCA to a reporting perspective.
Right. So just to boil it down a little bit, who are your target customers?
So our target customers are large enterprises and medium SMBs across the globes. Our focus has always been towards the hard to abate sectors to begin with, which is basically your steel, cement, pharma, logistics. And the idea is simple, because the hard to abate sector, you know, emits 40% of the global GSG, emissions. And let's say if this was a country, this would be the third largest country in terms of its carbon, emissions. So our focus was clearly to, go on the go and capture the ones which are like the biggest emitters.
And just to understand that again, so what does hard to abate mean?
Yeah, so hard to abate means is, the sectors where it is difficult to, abate the CO2 emissions because of the process. So hard to abate are those sectors where it is difficult in the nature, the way it is made in terms of its manufacturing. It will be difficult for them to mitigate those CO2 on a very straight line basis. So they have to have different levers, do a long term approach to kind of abate or reduce the CO2 emissions. So these hard to abate sectors are the ones which we see all across us: good buildings, beautiful constructions, best of healthcare. So all these, is coming at a cost that, ultimately these industries are difficult to, it's really difficult to kind of reduce their CO2 emissions. So these cement, steel, logistics, chemicals, largely this grouping is called hard to abate sector, and they all of them are emitting 40% of the total GHG emissions that we see in the globe.
I mean, that's a huge number. So I can understand even more. What makes it hard? Is it because they don't have the tools to track things properly, or maybe there hasn't been something invented yet, and that's why zero carbon one is there? What is it that makes it hard to actually track their carbon emissions?
Yes, very nice question. So it's not that they don't have the tools. They do have the tools. Let's take an example of a cement industry. Now, let's say how a cement is manufactured, which is limestone burning at a very high degree of heat, putting other elements like clinkers and all that. So the way cement is manufactured historically or traditionally is same how it was done. So the advent of new materials at a scale that is required across the globe is not matching the urgency of reducing the CO2. So, for example, why it is difficult is because the way it is manufactured. It's not that they don't
Right.
have the tools. It's just that historically it's been like that. Another example is, let's say, green steel that we keep talking across the globe, but the end cost of green steel is nearly 20% higher than your normal steel, which makes it unviable in a lot of market. And we are at a very competitive market across the globe with a lot of talks about tariffs, other stuff. So being competitive is very important for any enterprise into any continent, right? And hence, changing the entire thing and getting into a thing which is, let's say, 20% higher cost is one of the biggest challenge for them, because there would be no buyers or less buyers. B, that they don't even get that materials in that scale. So let's say if they require a huge amount of raw material for green raw material, they may not be able to procure it. So that's the reason it is called hard to abate, because there are not one but multiple challenges in terms of how it is built to kind of abate these gases.
Gotcha, gotcha. So what I heard from there is that these processes that we go about when we're producing materials from raw materials have been age old processes.
Mm.
And
Yes.
perhaps maybe we haven't had the opportunity to really look at how those different steps in the process are creating carbon emissions. And so, is this where Zero Carbon One gets involved? It
Yes.
manages or analyzes the entire process and finds the areas where there could be improvements.
Yes, absolutely. You're bang on. So what we have done is that we have kind of created tools around their materials, their energy mix and stuff like that. So we said, hey, look, there are certain things that we cannot change overnight, right? But surely we can optimize these things. And hence, we kind of created a tool wherein we are capturing the data real time and, bringing it to the dashboard so that, we are able to optimize the energies, the processes, so that the the hard to abate sector is also able to kind of reduce their energy intensity.
That makes a lot more sense to me. If you can maybe share a little bit more, so how do you actually go about measuring it? Is it just data reports, or are there sensors that you're putting in place?
Absolutely, very nice question. So what we tell to our enterprise clients is that you cannot manage what you cannot measure, right? And when you have to manage this, which would mean there is various ways of doing it. One of the most simpler ways of doing this is, most of the enterprises have some or the other kind of an ERP, enterprise resource planning system in place, wherein they can put all their bills or whatever materials they are buying and stuff like that. So we directly pick from there. So from their bills we would know month on month what kind of materials are going into their factory floor, what is the emission from where that material is coming, how that material was produced. So one of the easiest ways is to integrate the ERP. Now another way of doing this is that, when they say that let us put some flow sensors, some other sensors on the IoT devices on the factory floor to get the real time data on the dashboard, so that real time basis they can either optimize or they can have a better understanding of from where their energy intensity is happening. So you rightly said that we do it from using the IoT devices, which is the sensors and stuff like that from the factory floor. The other way is from the ERP. So they can just upload the bill onto our platform, and with that bill, we would be able to calculate all the emissions which that material is bringing to their factory. So these three ways they could we capture the data, and from that data we are able to do two things. One, we are able to know exactly where do they stand in terms of their emissions, and emissions largely, as you know, are categorized into direct, indirect, and value chain, which is scope 1, scope 2, and your scope 3. And now scope 3 being your suppliers, your value chain, people who have supplied to your suppliers and stuff like that. And scope 1, 2 is direct emission and indirect emission. So we capture all these, various aspects. So all these things we bring onto our dashboard, which is the enterprise dashboard. And from there, starts the real journey, that now they're aware that where do I stand in terms of a corporate, in terms of my emissions. Now what? Now what's the next thing to do? So from there starts the decarbonization journey on our platform, which is first is data
Hmm.
capture. Second is then we do the kind of optimization, that what if, which is a scenario analysis, which is if we replace, let's say, material A with material B, looking at the cost aspect, what does it has? Does it impact 5% cost but reduces 7% emission? Looks good. Let's kind of try this one. So these kind of levers which we give to our enterprise, which they are able to kind of fine play, which we call digital twin also. And with this they are able to reduce their intensity in terms of their emissions, and then all this data flows into a larger bucket, which is called ESG, which is their environmental social governance. How are they behaving on this data? One, on the environment side of it, then what is the impact on the social side of it, even in terms of health of workers, location, things like that, and how conscious they are in terms of their governance across various parameters, right? So one of the biggest challenge also remains in terms of getting this ESG report completed for a lot of enterprises. So one, not only the capturing of data, but getting this data itself is a challenge. And as I said, that it's costing them nearly $100 billion a year across the globe, because it's actually broken. It's Excel driven. There are multiple consultants. There are multiple suppliers. There are multiple software providers. So getting everything onto one table itself, is a very painful process.
I mean, that does sound like a lot of like moving parts. And so you explained a little bit about the journey of what it is to be a customer. Maybe in other words, if I were a prospective buyer, what am I actually buying from Zero Carbon One? Are you taking care of all those steps, onboarding a customer like myself, and then what is the output that I would see?
If you are a prospective customers, we are going to fix two things for you. One is the productivity of your employees in terms of they have to spend much less amount of time in terms of capturing and getting this. So what today takes your team anywhere between 6 weeks to 2 months or 2.5 months in terms of getting, using us, the same thing is happening in 3 or 4 days. Or once it is fixed, then it is
Wow.
actually flowing real time. So that is a big saving in terms of your productivity of employees. Second is the cost, because you don't have to depend on multiple consultants. You don't have to find various ways of bringing this data to the system. So thereby, once we have your suppliers linked to us and your entire floor linked to us, you actually end up saving cost. So productivity and cost both is what you get when you subscribe to a platform like Zero Carbon One.
Gotcha. And then talking about time savings, this is kind of where I was wondering, how does AI fit into this picture?
Yeah, so very nice question, and this one is I love, because I personally am very passionate about this, and working on this from last year and a half, and the way technology is evolving every 2 months, it is even more exciting, because it is making our job even more robust in terms of finding. So coming back to the AI layer. As I said that whatever this we talked about, decarbonization, getting the data, understanding the data, visualizing the data, and all these things. What do you think should be the end goal, right? So for some, the end goal is having a right kind of a ESG report. wherein they can talk about whatever they did, how they did it, right? And second could be that, they could go for the ratings that look, as a corporate, we are really sensible in terms of, following all the things which are prescribed for a company to follow. Now, in both these scenarios, as I said, data becomes a pain point, and tracing that to its logical conclusion becomes a pain point. These large enterprises, they take anywhere between 4 to 6 months to make one ESG report, because it involves multiple departments, multiple data, multiple things, and it has to be reminded every day. It's like, let's say HR, coming back and say, hey, guys, give your tax saving stuff so that, we have to compute and come back. But it's a never ending follow up, right? Here, what we have done is we have got the agentic tools into play, where now our tool, kind of goes to the people whom data has to be collected. You don't need a person to do that. See, so the tool does it, comes back, puts on the dashboard, and takes back to the manager, the real human manager, that, hey, this is where we are. These many people responded, these many people have not responded. And I'm really excited to share that, we are going to add another layer, which is that these agents would be able to call up the people inside the company and say, hey, John, this email is pending about these things, why don't you fill and send it back? So it's going to follow up just like a human, and kind of collate all this data where you would have put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 resources, and would have taken, again, weeks and months to kind of collate. So this is happening much 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 faster with us. So this kind of automation is what we are doing, so which means right from data capture automation to the final reporting automation, right? You are getting into a system where it's like you plug it, and you get a final result out in terms of your actual report.
That sounds like an amazing solution. So, not to make it any simpler, but all that data collection, the information that needs to be gathered, largely a human process, lots of connecting dots to get to a single report. Traditionally, without a tool like yours, how big are these teams that are producing these reports? I'm imagining there's different departments that have different responsibilities. They also have to produce a report, which then gets aggregated or consolidated into a single report. How big is that change in a corporate's staffing and resourcing?
Oh, that's a huge cost. That's a huge cost. That is the you know totaling to somewhere around $100 billion annually, right? Because typically a enterprise which is of large size would have, anywhere between 25 to 30 people, depending upon geography, locations, how many plants we have got, how many, junior and senior resources we have got. And again, within those resources, you have to have the subject matter domain experts that, who understand that, what is happening. And then you have the real people in terms of the operational people, the factory people, who are how they are doing it, right? Who are the implementers. So the team can be as low as, 10 people could go into a couple of hundred in terms of their size across the globe. And it's a big cost. It's a people cost, it's a productivity cost. So we are able to bring that to the table, which definitely solves the cost problem. And you don't need a battery of sustainability people to kind of do something, which using technology can be done much much faster and at a much much lower cost.
And I'm sure you get this question a lot, and I'm also curious about this. But with the talk about AI and its ability to increase productivity, how do you answer the question about, well, what do we do with our staff, and what is is any fear around that?
As we see as technology leaders, that there would be definitely, people who will get impacted by it, right? Because there would be, some jobs which can be automated, right? And hence those people might not be as valuable as they are if there is no technology, right? But then the thing is, you cannot really have an ostrich approach and kind of think that it is not happening. See, whether we or anybody else, see, technology is going to evolve, and it is evolving every day. So it will be there, and it will definitely impact the people also, without a doubt. Now, how do we deal with that? And that is the reason we talk about the concept of ESG, which is sometimes very loosely talking. But the social responsibility of the corporate here is also to reskill the people into things which are more required. The corporates all the time, they want good people, they're hiring all the time. when you already have your people whom you can reskill and utilize them into a better department or resource, that is one way of doing it. The other would be that if you are still not fitting anywhere, then the only and the honest answer is that you have to actually reskill, you know, to be utilized into any of these industries which are across the globe. So definitely there is a human cost. Definitely would be uh, there would be some heartbreaks, which definitely would be there. But then the idea is that as technology evolves, as humans we have to evolve. And this is a very good topic because it reminds me of the book I read long time back, which was When Machines Do Everything, What Human Will Do, right? And it talks about a very funny story of a gentleman in England who was trying to invent the grass mowing machine, which could cut the grass and all that. And before this machine was made, people used to cut the grass by hand, and that used to be biggest employer, because imagine so many people in the fields cutting grass, and you are inventing a machine. So he wrote that I used to test that machine in the night, because I was afraid if I do it in the morning, people would catch and kill him. But did that stop that machine not coming into the play? It did. So what happened? Maybe some people would have definitely lost job, but they would have got reskilled and have moved into some other aspects of the society. So what we can learn from the history is that we have to keep on upscaling ourselves as a society. As more tool comes to our help, it is at the same time also at the cost of some jobs, for sure.
Right. It's definitely a, a tough one to balance, and it's easy to see it one way or the other. Maybe it's like, to understand this a little bit more, unlike other problems or challenges that we're experiencing in the world, something like carbon emissions and global warming is increasingly becoming a concern of ours. So in that respect, maybe there is some leeway because we are kind of at a turning point, let's say, about where we are as a world in our carbon emissions. But I'm curious from your perspective, how are we doing?
We have yet to see the urgency, because I'll tell you what. Uh, it's just like when I speak to some of my team members who are into climate sciences, air sciences. So they always tell me this thing that, hey, Abhinav, we are in a slow pandemic. People don't understand it because unlike Corona, you cannot see what is happening. But the climate change, it's a slow pandemic, which is already happening. For example, Middle East, Dubai, getting rains and flooded, which was never heard of. So you find that, deserts getting rain, and places which used to be colder getting warm, place which used to be warm, kind of getting very chilly winters. So the thing is that we are playing with the nature, and since the nature speaks when it has to speak, and it speaks really silently but very strongly, and we saw that a couple of years back. So I'm really kind of cautious and also apprehensive that how it will turn out, because where it comes from is also we do a lot of scenario analysis. What happens if there is a flood, and what happens if there is a flood, there is a rain, there is a thunder? So what happens if there are multiple devastating climate events along with the earthquake, scenario? And I always feel, what if these kind of things are triggered by the climate, which is what is happening? And then we see that we as a human will feel so helpless, because we won't be able to do anything, right? And since it is not happening, we kind of sometimes shrug it off and say, hey, it's fine, let's go slow. But I think we are not doing really well in terms of that, because I think lot much needs to be done. Lot many things have happened, right? I would not say that we have absolutely done nothing. We are walking in the right direction. People are conscious, but I think more and more regulation needs to come in. More and more support needs to be given. See, it's not that climate is free. The climate needs attention, just like how we build the industrialization, where massive amounts of millions of dollars flow into kind of making us the society we are. Now we also need to spend back and ensure that we restore the balance, so that gradually we bring it back in couple of centuries to where we were, so that we leave a better place for our children and their children. We cannot be greedy and kind of shrug it off that it's not my problem. But I would say that uh, the climate is a pandemic which is waiting to explode.
That's a really, really interesting analogy of how to explain the situation. I can definitely appreciate that in many different ways. In that respect, in terms of the work that you've been doing, what sort of impact have you been seeing? How is it improving the situation, or how has your tool itself been helping?
One of the greatest thing that we are seeing is that lot many people who think that they are not having too much of emission because they are unable to kind of conceptualize that what exactly is coming in terms of concepts and in terms of what is their totally impact negative impact on the society. But with our tool, the best impact that I see for the first time is that they are able to see that what is their negative impact on the emission part, which they are denying before we walk into the room, because they think that things like travel, things like electricity and stuff like that, which
Hmm.
we take for granted, it is okay. Things like what we use, for example, we have all these large language models and GPDs of the world, used by billions every day. This is having a major impact in terms of emissions, right? So as the corporate, sometimes when we are able to present our tool and we are able to collect all the data and put it to the perspective of the management, sometimes they are shocked that is this the impact. And that's what we tell them, that this is the precise impact that your organization is having. So one of
Hmm.
the impact that I see is that we are transparently able to kind of bring the truth on the table, which I think is one of our biggest missions also, to kind of bring integrity and transparency into the climate space.
Right. Yeah, it's very, very important. And I think you mentioned it earlier, where what can be measured can be managed, and it's also this concept of out of sight, out of mind. So if you can't see it, then you can't manage it or you can't improve it. So why don't you tell us what is one success story that you have that has really been maybe the pillar or the calling card for your solution that you've done over the last few years?
Yeah. So there have been quite few success stories that we have seen, and every case, every story has a success built to it. But one of the things, building on to what we were just previously discussing, was a company which was manufacturing you know jaggery cups. So there's a small company called Attaway. What it does, it has a cup which is made of jaggery. Now you can, once you consume whatever tea, coffee, whatever you're having, you could either eat it or you can put it back in the soil and it's biodegradable and it goes off. Now one of the thing that before they met us was that they were unable to convince the customers or even the investors or even the corporates, that they're large corporates, that what is the real impact that they can bring onto the table in terms of reducing the water intensity, or circularity, or in terms of SDGs, or even in terms of emissions, that what actual emissions went into making their own product, right? And how it is impactful. So they had all these things that they knew they were doing, but they did not have any numbers to back it. They did not have any methodology which is scientific to back their claims. So when they came to us, they were kind of doing some 100,000 odd annual revenue, and post the work that we did for them, which was kind of created impact report in terms of finding where, how their cup was manufactured, what was their emission in terms of their logistics, stuff like that. Compared it with, let's say, a paper cup, compared it with a wooden one, with plastic and all kind of scenarios. Then they were able to kind of increase their revenue to 7x. Now they are doing 700 thousand USD annual revenue, which I'm really happy to kind of help this company grow with our impact. And I don't want to spill the beans, but they're in talks with one of the large airports to kind of in South Asia to kind of get the entire contract, which is a big one, for them to kind of have their jaggery cups placed there in the entire thing, because this airport wants to be a sustainable airport across the globe. So with the kind of stuff that we bring to table, we are really happy to kind of help such kind of clients who are doing good, but they don't have the right backing or right methodology to kind of explain it in a manner that a lot of corporates and their clients believe in them, because earlier they were talking, right? But they did not have any factual proofs how it is happening. So I think now with our help, we are able to kind of help many such corporates to kind of create their impact story.
Wow, that's a beautiful story of how it both impacted the actual organization and also the organization that they sell to. So there's flow on effects. That's beautiful.
And 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 for an organization like us, we got many references from people who were into similar or different domain, selling similar sustainability products which had no backing in terms of understanding that what is the real impact. So it definitely helped us also a big time in terms of getting more reference customers. But yes, it is really very satisfying to see that not only their revenue is jumping 7x, but they are actually doing a good job for the planet.
That is a very powerful story to be sharing with people. I mean, I have to ask just one question on this. So when you went in and you said that you increased the revenue by 7x, was that because the reports you generated show where they can reduce cost on high intensity processes within the step, or were there other things that your tool was recommending? Out of curiosity.
Yes, yes. No, no, absolutely. Very good question. So it was the absolutely other way around, right? Because they were already, making a stuff which was very low in terms of emission intensity. How our tool helped was that kind of mapping their entire journey, right, from where they were sourcing. So it was a jaggery, so from where the jaggery was coming, which was from sugarcane. So our tool was take it back to the fields, which is from sugarcane. What happens, what kind of stuff is getting wasted, what is getting collected from where, then from there how it is getting logistically shipped to another place, then what kind of heat parameters they are using to make those cups, what is happening. So our tool kind of did a backward integration to kind of complete a story that to make one jaggery cup, how much carbon intensity was logically with the proofs deployed in terms of to get that. Now, before we were not there in the picture, when we were not there in the picture, they were unable to explain this entire integration with proofs, right? And hence they were kind of quoting that it has got. So the funny part was the company was initially, when they met me, they claimed that they had no emission, right? They are a zero emission company. And I told them it's not possible. So they said, no, look, we are a jaggery company, there's no emission, there's nothing. So I mean, it is coming out of a product which is and hence that was the problem, because that is what, when they were pitching to their clients, the clients were not believing them, because because they were saying something which does not look you know factual, right? And that's where we told them that, look, your scope 1 is 0, but your scope 2 and scope 3 emissions are there. Not only what is happening in terms of logistics, but what heat is getting deployed, what people are doing, what they are traveling, whatever minimalistic it is, but even in the fields, the methane offsets and stuff like that. So they did not know all those technicalities. Hence, when they were presenting it to their customers, they were kind of putting it as a layman to their enterprise customers who were skeptical. They wanted to spend dollars because they everybody wants to do good work. So the corporate wanted to back them, but they did not find it convincing enough to kind of back them, because there was no traceability. Now, what can happen is they can just give the logins, as in the dashboard logins. The somebody can log in and see from where the material is traveling, right from its source to how it is getting manufactured. Now that gives anybody a confidence that what, so it's breaking down into each step. So now when you are claiming something, it has a proof, and hence they started getting orders which they were not getting earlier. So earlier when which they were still at $100,000. Some people will take, some will not take. But with this kind of proof, when they went to large corporates, immediately they got 2, 3 large orders, which helped them to kind of scale up 7x. And that is their stepping stone to go and now pitch to a airport deal, right? So it is up and away kind of a scenario, that once you are able to understand that what can be done. So sometimes it cannot be just reduction. Sometimes it can be actually traceability, which can give you a massive jump in terms of your revenue. But studying that, let me give you another example where you talk about the tool in terms of reducing the intensity. Now this is on a large cement plant, and they again, it had a similar scenario that we talked about. They had Excel sheets, they had multiple consultants, they had this thing. With our tool we automated everything, and we gave them a tool which is a digital twin in terms of what is their energy mix, and what happens if they reduce A with B, scenario analysis. If they increase solar, if they remove, kind of replace captive power with third party, multiple scenarios, if they increase a particular material, decrease a particular material. So with this kind of stuff they were able to reduce 1% of their energy emission, which was previously there. In 3.5 months they saw a percentage drop, which is good enough for a large enterprise, to kind of using our tool to kind of do that. So it all depends what kind of company you are. For some the tool can help and identify and reduce the emission. For some it can help them present it in a much better way, which can help them get more customers.
Yeah, that is huge. That's a huge value proposition for especially those who need that credibility. They need that verification, which kind of brings me to the next point. Verification is a very tricky subject that at least I understand in the carbon market. What or how do you actually verify that there's an improvement in the carbon emissions?
From in terms of emissions, yeah. So there are two different topics here. One is the carbon credits that you touched upon, right? The carbon credits, right? Is that you touched upon?
Sorry, you said carbon credits?
Yeah. So carbon credit is one another market, and the emission is another market. So
Hmm.
we are into the emission market. We are not into the carbon credit market. The carbon credit market, is they have got their regulators, which is Vera, Gold Standard, and there are set agencies who go and verify. And in our scenario, in terms of emissions, again there are third party, which are the auditors. So whatever we are doing for our clients, all these go for the audit by these third party, because there is this maker and checker concept. Because if we are making, we cannot check what we are ourselves making. So whatever we are doing for our clients, there are not many auditors in the market, large ones, middle sized ones, who kind of do the final auditing, that whatever we have done. And in terms of how this emission thing happens, so there are set protocols, which are there in the world. For example, there is GSG emission protocol, greenhouse gas emission protocol. There is DEFRA, which is there in Europe. There is, IEA, there is ISO. So there are various standards and methodologies which are already laid down in terms of how to calculate emissions. So there is an emission factor for each thing. So for example, every mile you travel, there is an emission depending upon what kind of fuel you took, what kind of vehicle you took. So there is an emission in each of them. Likewise, for each material, there is an emission. Now, the thing is that there could be a material which where you do not find a direct emission, but then you have to break down that material, and again that material would have been made from some other materials. Now what is the emission factor of those materials? Those are defined in the methodology. So a job of the sustainability person in my team is to do this thing only full time, kind of understand that what is the material, what is the emission factor, is the emission factor authentic, or does the emission factor needs a refinement. So all these are the subject matter expert job, which is largely governed by the GSG DEFRAs of the world.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes more sense now. I gotcha. So, I have to ask this question before we move on, but where does blockchain fit into this whole equation?
So there are three things, where it fits into the play. One is that, you briefly touched upon the carbon credits market, right? So carbon credits, as you understand, so it's whatever is your emission, you can buy carbon credits and offset your emissions. Okay. Now, in this particular carbon credit market, there is a lot of issues in terms of trust, because there have been so many cases where the same piece of land was claimed by multiple corporates as in their offset area, right? Now what we do, as I started in the brief, that we collect all the data and we bring it to the table to tell this is your total emission. For some corporates, what they say is that, from my total emission, now I want to become carbon neutral. So I want to buy carbon credits and become carbon neutral. So on our platform, we have got 160 verified projects, from Vera, Gold Standard, Puro. various regulators of these carbon credits. So there are project developers. So all these project developers have listed their projects on our platform. Now the corporate, when he's offsetting his GSD emission, his CO2 emissions from a particular carbon credit project, this is done on the blockchain. So that what happens is this gives a proper hash that when it was done, which year it was done, how much it was done, so that when if you offset and if you become carbon neutral in 25, you cannot claim the same thing in 27, 28, 29, and stuff like that. So it will
Right.
give clear transparency, because these are some large level headlines. So somebody says, hey, we became carbon neutral, we bought 5 lakh credits, but you bought it in year 22. We are sitting in year 25. What about the emissions in subsequent years? What this accounted for in the previous buying, or you are going to buy them on a back date, as in from a pro rata basis. So this transparency of blockchain is to kind of show that whatever you have done, whether it is authentic. And also what we are doing is that as we go further, we are also saying that you could publish any report that is written in stone. For example, your emission, right? You can publish that on a blockchain, right? But in our platform, what essentially it is getting used is for the buying and credit, carbon credits, so that this hash goes into your dashboard, as well as it goes as a proof in your ESG report or any of the rating reports that you would go henceforth.
Yeah, I love that. I love seeing how blockchain is making its way into more practical aspects of just simply tracking and reporting and preventing double dipping in many respects. Well, how about I mean, there's so much more here to I would love to unpack, and I'm sure we could talk for hours, but I'd love to jump into a bit about the business side of things. And, just hearing about these stories that you've just shared with us, it seems like a no-brainer. Like, if I am a company or corporate that's concerned with my environmental impact, particularly around carbon emissions, I should be using a tool like Zero Carbon One. So, out of curiosity, what seems to be or is the challenge when it comes to getting your solution out there and growing it so that more people are using it?
One of the biggest challenge, because emission largely is actually driven by regulation, right? Until unless there is no regulation, it's a voluntary market. And when there is a voluntary market, the corporate can buy it now, or they can postpone their decision to kind of buy it after 3 months, after 6 months, after 9 months. One of the biggest challenges that we face is this procrastination of the enterprises in lot of market, because they want it, but since there is no regulatory need of doing it on an immediate basis, they defer it sometime. And that's the reason, one of the biggest thing that we have done, or to overcome this challenge, is to kind of show them the cost side impact, that when you plug us in, it's not only about reducing your emission, but I shared the story of Ataware, how they were able to increase their revenue. So even for the large enterprise, it's difficult to kind of
Mhm.
put that proposition, because they already have a very structured approach. Getting that urgency on the table is one of the biggest challenge. So the buying happens, today we are converting customers whom we initiated talk a year back. So from 1 year the talks are going, now we have kind of reached a situation where we have got it converted. So 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 the, one of the biggest challenges is that there is a lot of gestation period, they take it really slow. And it's the reverse also. Sometimes what happens, suddenly there is a regulatory need which happens, suddenly we get flooded with the requirements that so for example, CBAM happening, getting postponed, so kind of they put it under the table. When they see that CBAM
Mhm.
is not actually happening, so we get a lot of inquiries in terms of how do we make it. So I would say one of the biggest challenge remains the regulatory framework across the globe. And as more and more things are plugged into by the governments of various continents, various countries, because climate needs this, right? It's not just a show, but it actually is the real requirement. And once we see more and more uh, uh, you know uh, focus by the governments, I think that will help a company like us to grow much 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 faster. So our challenge remains that that we are able to convert all these things, we are able to demonstrate this, we are able to convince. But since there is no regulatory framework or very urgent need of for them to kind of immediately take that, the decision sometimes takes lot of time to kind of get converted.
It comes back to incentives, and I'm sure you understand this much from your finance background, and the
Yes.
saying goes, show me the incentives and I'll show you the behavior. And
Yes.
it's interesting that, it seems to be the case unless we get penalized for something, maybe we don't actually act on it. And then at the same time, if we act on it once we get penalized, maybe it's a little bit too late.
Yes.
And in this case, the outcomes of us not acting on it sooner than later could be far worse than we can expect. That's almost irreversible. It's an interesting challenge to be in. You mentioned there where one incentive may be perhaps that you can increase your top line, your revenue per
Yes.
se. And so I'm curious, when you're marketing or advertising your solution, how is the communication there? You touched on it briefly, and is it more along the lines of regulatory frameworks, or is it more about the benefits of what this can do for a company?
Yeah, so I would say our communication has been a mix of both. In some angles, we talked about the regulatory framework, which is, let's say, upcoming, right? Upcoming framework which could impact them negatively, either in terms of financial losses or in terms of their brand, equity or brand harm. So in some of our communications, it has been more on the regulatory side of it, and the other has been on the value proposition, that how getting this in is actually not only helping you reduce, but actually is able to help you optimize your entire operations. Because once you know what your supply chain is behaving in a very digitalized manner along with the cost, not only you are able to play along with the emissions, but you are also able to play along with the cost, which is what has been our learning, working with some of the clients, that we were talking emissions, but once the entire tool was built, they were like every day seeing it from a cost perspective, right? It was okay, like we got it done, but it has many benefits, beyond emission. So they were able to kind of bring their material things into impact, their costing into control. So it has multiple benefits. So if we do in true spirit, it not only reduces the emission part of it, but also optimizes your operation as an enterprise.
And for those who may be getting into climate tech and helping with carbon emissions, for a company like yourself, how are you actually going about marketing, or how are you actually going about sales? What channels are you using? Formats?
This entire thing is a very top driven approach, because it's a top to bottom kind of a sales approach, right? You cannot actually go from bottom to top in a climate scenario, because these are the calls, either are these are taken by the CFOs or the sustainability heads or sometimes the management itself, right? So so I would say the go to channel is obviously, since it's a B2B, it's been very formal, which is things like LinkedIn, and things like having specific workshops on areas which is of the interest of the management. But I would say it's a mix of networking in terms of events. So events and LinkedIn is something I would say our go to market strategy for long. We have kind of, when you have specialized let's say ESG event, or you have got a carbon events and things like that, you can go and kind of meet customers who are there, because they have that mindset, they're looking for that kind of solution. So it makes sense to be there and kind of pitch them. So that is one. Things like even New York Climate Week, because everybody is into that framework, that mind frame. So there you can present your solutions. So I would say events would be one of the biggest enabler in terms of conversion. And then definitely there is LinkedIn, that you find out who are your ideal ICP, and with those you can go and target them, find the right prospect customer, right chain, then kind of go with them. So also you would also need to have, so for example, what one of the techniques that we use was a pilot freemium model, which is basically you user without any cost obligations. And if you do not see a value or benefit, you are free to kind of discontinue that, right? Because we are really bullish and we are really sure that we would be able to extract value once you plug us in. So that approach has worked for us. Many clients had the apprehension that they don't want to spend a single dollar before they were convinced that it's going to do something for them. But once it got plugged in and they were able to kind of map many journeys in terms of their product, their emission, their supply chains, they were convinced that yes, this will make sense for a long-term integration.
Yeah, there's definitely the event stuff. New York Climate Week is definitely an important place to be for a service or solution like this. Maybe as like a cautionary tale or lessons learned in your journey for someone getting into the space. What are the things to really look out for? Maybe some of the things that you're experiencing right now as your own personal bottlenecks in the company, so that an aspiring entrepreneur can make sure that they approach these things in a different
Yeah.
way.
As you enter this field, the canvas is so big. There is so much to do, and you can easily get overwhelmed that you're trying to solve problem for everybody, right? And that happens with all of us. So as a cautionary tale, I would say that don't go for each and every sector, each and every industry. Just pick one problem area and just stick to it in the initial years, and just try and solve that problem. So it could be a sector, it could be a specific problem. Once you are able to do that successfully, you would have enough traction, energy, and reference to kind of convert the other clients, which otherwise you would have find difficult, burning a lot of dollars and going to wrong industries, pitching at a wrong tree, right? So all these things, we have done and we have learned from our mistake. We wanted to go and do everything, and that's the reason we understood that we should not do everything, because some people understand, some may not understand, because there's no urgency for that. And that's the reason we pivoted from our initial time to come to a hard to abate sector initially. That we just wanted to do couple of industries only, just wanted to focus on there. We were able to understand their product, and we were able to crack one of those companies, and then automatically the other companies came into the play, that we understand the material modeling, material side, technical side. So they were convinced that we would be able to handle and do that. So that is how I would suggest that don't go for the entire ocean. First go for a specific coast, and then once you're able to kind of do it in a perfect manner, automatically you will swim and cover the larger ground.
Gotcha, gotcha. So focus is key. It always seems to be the case in a lot of these ventures, if you will. So once one gets into a business like yours, like what are some of the bottlenecks that you're currently experiencing, the challenges that are maybe getting in the way of your growth?
There are multiple challenges. So there could be the challenge in terms of it could be in the terms of capital, that you want to grow much faster, you want to put more people into the play, but you have to choose wisely where to spend, where to kind of hold on. That normally is the biggest challenge that any startup initially faces, right? So you would have the resource allocation optimization challenge, because don't want to be your burn rate to be really high, because initially you got to burn before starting to kind of get the customers in. Right. So that is one aspect of it. Second is getting the right kind of people. That is the key, because I mean, sorry to say, but when you find talent, be it a tech or be a expert, a domain expert, you would find people have everything written in their CV, right? So finding and since if you are a startup, finding the right person who knows and is not coming at a cost which is going to break your bank, right? So
Hmm.
that kind of challenge you have to, as an entrepreneur, figure out that how do you keep the cost optimized and not kind of over leverage on a particular resource, and also have somebody who actually understands the nitty gritty of the game, so that when the actual clients are there, you are able to deliver, and it makes the client feels good. So that kind of stuff.
It's always an interesting question to ask, but someone with your level of success and as well as how much the business has been growing, are you experiencing any of these challenges yourself?
Yeah, so see, capital challenge is definitely there for any startup, because money is not infinite in terms of you cannot be present in all the events happening all across the globe. right? So I'm just giving a perspective. So sometimes you really find a fantastic talent that you think is amazing, right? But that pedigree of talent is something that at current stage you are not able to attract, right? So these are the challenges which are pretty natural as in the journey you grow. It all depends on the entrepreneur's experience and perspective. So fortunately for me, I come with a kind of experience where I'd hired many people into many jobs, and huge amount of people reporting into large structures. So I would say that I've been little lucky in terms of finding the right talent and putting the right talent into the right place. So that has been a satisfying thing, that I could say. But yes, there are other constraints that you want to have. You want to put more people onto the ground. You want to have and service more customers. You want to be present at a more events. But you have to be kind of also mindful of how much you can do, how you cannot do. So that challenge is there with the entrepreneur to kind of do the check and balances and ensure that few wins do not get into your head, and you suddenly
Mm.
go full blast mode. And because things sometimes are up, sometimes it could go slow. So have to be mindful that the wins are there, which is good, but then you have to have a consistent approach in terms of before reaching a level where maybe 4 quarters, or maybe couple of bad quarters does not affect your company.
Got it. Got it. I mean, it's interesting your story because you come from a VC background, and I would imagine you have access to certain resources. But why did you choose not to be VC funded for this type of project?
Precisely for the reason that I have been into that ecosystem. So I understand that what exactly the ecosystem is looking for, right? And in terms of, there are two things. One, that uh, I want to raise as late as I could. That was one of the first thing. And since I was myself investing, and I had that runway that I could still run without having the VC to come on board, because initial journey of a startup is very very crucial. Because as a founder, you have to pivot, you have to understand, you have to create vision. And when you have external people kind of on the table, they would definitely have their say in terms of what to attempt, what not to attempt. And this
Mhm.
could compromise your overall vision, which is there, right? And I never wanted this to be kind of compromised in any way. And hence, I choose not to kind of get outside investor onto our cap table. The best way to do it is to kind of have the customers play, your angels, and kind of grow in that fashion. So I had my own runway. Plus, I wanted that during the initial years, I do not want to get disturbed in terms of what I am building, which is of utility to the customer. The point is that startup is has to be really really, what do you say, agile, in terms of we are building A, but the client is demanding C. But somebody has put money on you just looking at A, and when you are
Mhm.
attempting C, because what is the customer is requiring, there could be friction. So I want to keep it really simple, that we are here for customers. We want to solve their problems. We want to make sure it's not complicated, it is easy, they get the value, and at the same time our planet gets what it deserves in terms of understanding that how we have to reduce. So it's you have various stakeholders here, and you have to juggle everybody. And that's the reason I wanted to kind of not have external pressure to kind of not live or build the entire vision that I've thought for this company. And that's the reason we were able to integrate so many services, because I get this point from many people. And as I said, one of the easiest ways that do one thing, just kind of focus too much on one aspect, and make it successful, which is good also. It works, but sometimes you have to see that what is the larger impact you want to do, right? What is the bigger vision that you have for the company? Because you are not alone in the ocean. There are many other players. There are many other competitors who are along sailing with you. So how do you differentiate with them? What is the larger value proposition that you can bring into the play? what is if all this becomes free, for example, right? How would you still survive or have a value proposition which is beyond the initial offerings? So, you have to build it to last, right? So for that, the entrepreneur has to have a vision and to run it. So that's the reason I choose not to kind of get external people on the earlier part of my journey.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Having autonomy is the way I would put it in some respects. And it's especially with someone with your background and experience, you already know what might happen or what could happen when you have outside capital kind of calling the shots. And I think it's a very important thing to remember as social entrepreneurs that sometimes their incentives to do certain things may not align with the greater goal. So that's very interesting. Now, just a fun question. If you had a magic wand, where would you use it to fix one problem in your company, which would lead to maybe growth? Let's talk about like, if there's one thing that would just unlock growth in your business, what would that be and how would you use that magic wand for that?
If I have to just play the magic word, I would say I would kind of replicate a digital twin of myself and have it kind of lead at two fronts, which I think could, which I would think would multiply the journey much 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 faster.
That is a very interesting problem to have. And is that, you manage 27 people is what I've understood. There's a lot of people that you're under your management. But is this a function of just not having enough time? Like, how are you managing that many people? And as I know it, you travel between different countries all the time as well. So I'm curious.
So I'm a very very autonomous. I'm very very kind of a delegate. I delegate the things. I do not keep a control with myself, because this I have figured out from my experience that if you are the person who has to do all the things, then the team is not growing, you are not growing, the startup is not growing, right? So all those 27 people do not report directly, so they are all delegated. So there are people they report in further. So for example, I took a very conscious call of not beyond initial time, not to get into the sales calls, right, with my people. So I taught them in the initial levels, then I let them do the stuff because they would make mistakes, which they did. We even had intern who kind of fumbled and kind of stated something which was wrong, which put the client off. And the intern called me. He said, "I'm really sorry." I said this. I said, "Fine, but these are the things that you need to learn, right? Which is okay. You will make problems. You will realize it." And I think that learning I have been able to pass on to my team. So they take the ownership themselves. That if it is happening, it's happening because of them. It's not happening, nobody's going to get after their life, right? So that is how we have kind of kept growing, because if I keep everything down tied down to my table, it'll kind of become much much more difficult, and our growth will become much 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 slower. So with the experimentation, and in fact, we have a thing that in our company, that we are driven by ideas, and we are not driven by a hierarchy. So if somebody's CEO, does not mean that the others will not have a say. So I've kept it like that. That if you have something which is more value than what I have got in terms of opinion or process, I would rather go for something which I'm willing to experiment, and that is what it is, and it has worked for me. I mean, the good part about these Gen Zs are that they're open, they're vocal, they're not bogged down, and I love that, because that has given us so many big wins in terms of processes, in terms of automation, in terms of client wins. So I've kept it very, so our DNA is like that only, that nobody's afraid of anything, and we trick and we take our chances. And
Hmm.
everybody who thinks that we could do this has a liberty to kind of go and do
That's
that.
delegation, very important. I really, really believe in that and agree with that. I always find this question funny because when people say AI clone, I'm like curious, what does the real Abhinav want to focus on? And what things would Abhinav clone take care of? And you mentioned sales is one of them. What other things are there? Where would you like to focus your time?
I would rather try and focus more, as in, if I have to focus, I want to focus more on different geographies, because each geography has its own challenges in terms of technological, in terms of advocacy, in terms of policies, right? So I would like to kind of play a very larger layer in terms of uh, stitching together that how cross functional things could be. So for example, I just like to bring an example of, let's say, a thing which is not directly in our control, but as a policy advocacy we would like to do, which is having multiple ESG standards across the globe, which creates a lot of confusion in the enterprises across the globe. So for example, you have accounting principles, debtors, creditors, debit, credit, which is universal. Everybody from US to Australia understands what accounting principles are. And that is my thing, that we should keep the ESG principles in a similar way, so that everybody in every country, every continent understand what it means for business, and there should not be gray areas. So I would rather like to play that larger role, which brings the entire ecosystem, entire climate community together, and let the other Abhinav drive the company. And that's been my focus, kind of growing into the journey. That I that's the reason I delegate, and I'm kind of creating leaders, irrespective of their age, to kind of take over each of those operations, under their leadership, and kind of grow it to a great level.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's the higher strategic, things that only Abhinav can do, and then there's the other things for the clone. That's always an interesting question to ask and see how people respond. So Abhinav, where do you see zero carbon one in the next 6 to 12 months? Maybe 2 to 3 years.
I see myself as I know as Zero Carbon One as a more formidable brand in climate tech across the globe. So 2 3 years down the line, I would rather have people revisit this podcast and listen to what we were saying about our journey at this point of time. So from here to 2 3 years down the line, I see us really kind of known in terms of what we are able to bring in terms of table, in terms of impact. So I think in a climate space we would be a known name, driving along with the industry.
Well, we'll use this as accountability for you, Abhinav. I'll see you in 2 3 years, and I'll say that you said this, and we'll see where
Yes,
you're at.
absolutely, absolutely. I love those challenges, and I'm pretty sure the way we are shaping up and the way the even the industry is shaping up, we could be targeting even a faster growth from that aspect.
You don't have to answer this, but I just want to ask, like, do you have a goal for next year? Like, what is the revenue that you're looking for, and how do you plan to achieve that?
Yeah. So our so we kind of are at a half a million kind of a run rate, and we look at kind of growing it multifold. I mean, at least 2 to 3x or 4x, right? I don't want to set a number to kind of sometimes not challenge myself and the team. We are looking at, let's say, a 5x, 6x, even 7x to kind of grow, right? Because we think that there is so much to achieve and there is so much to offer, that I see that this is happening. Now how we are going to do it, again we will kind of rely on the success stories that we have got, and then we will keep continuing to build on the references that we are getting now. We'll keep on kind of building on to the events and stuff that we were doing, and the way we are shaping now, uh, I see us at a very realistic position to kind of grow at this kind of number.
Beautiful. Definitely a lot to undertake for a solution of your scale and the level of impact that it can make across the entire system globally, to say the least. So, Abhinav, it's been a really great conversation with you. I would just like to ask this one thing for people that are, maybe not so aware. Why should people care about the problem that you're trying to solve?
If they think that they are also responsible to kind of give a beautiful planet to their children or to their grandchildren, then they owe it to the planet, not to the climate space as such, but to the planet, because this is something which is very very critical, and we as a human race should not take things for granted. I mean, they were mighty mammals and mighty stuff like even dinosaurs and all that. who would have thought they would get extinct, right? At their time and age, they were mighty. But when the nature spoke, or the things, the cosmos spoke, it has the ability to kind of completely, rewrite the entire book, right? We as human race should not be at the receiving end of all this. We've been a very clever race, and since we understand that what we are doing, it is our responsibility as a race, together as a human race, to kind of give it back in whatever small ways we could give it back. So it's not that, why should I care about climate. The larger and the more serious question is why I should not. I mean, it makes much more sense to kind of think about the things that we enjoy, which comes free of cost, right? We cannot keep destroying this entire thing, taking it for granted. So I would say, in place of why, I would say why not.
The foresight is necessary. That's definitely an important thing to consider. So,
And one small thing I would like to add on here, because I don't want you to get into the other side of it, but you see a lot of small kids across global south. I've seen they have got so much problems. The kids under 10 years of age, in terms of asthma, in terms of poor air quality, in terms of bad lungs, so many things are getting affected in the global south, right? These things were never heard of, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 60 years ago. And obviously, a century ago, it was not there. So the thing is that as we are going, there is an impact which is happening across the globe. If it is not getting highlighted, does not mean it is not happening. So it is the responsibility of every one of us to kind of hand over a good planet to our children when we leave this earth.
100%, totally agree. Yeah, we are more interconnected than we think.
Yes.
And sometimes we don't see it. And then that's what a solution like Zero Carbon One does, where because you can't see the connections.
Yes.
And like you were saying earlier, what can be measured can be managed.
Yes.
So the effects of our behaviors or actions, we just don't simply know. We're just lacking awareness. And I feel like Zero Carbon One is one of those solutions that makes it a little easier for us to understand how we are impacting the world and how that's impacting each and every one of us in
Correct.
our homes, in our communities. And it's such a great thing to see coming out from people like you and the work that you've been doing. So, where can we see you next? What's up for Zero Carbon One? I remember you saying something about Stanford and the seed venture capital program.
So I was personally involved in terms of, I was part of a cohort, which is Stanford Seed Spark program for South Asia. So I've just kind of completed that program, and Zero Carbon One is part of that network. So we have a network effect. We kind of are growing into all the regions, and we are trying to leverage all possible things which are there. And Stanford itself is a huge uh, network, which can help uh, you know companies like us who are doing some real impact in climate to kind of gain traction.
Gotcha. That's a key piece of advice for people getting into the space is networks, getting involved with other people who are doing similar work.
Yes.
Well, Abhinav, it's been a great conversation. I know we could keep on talking, but I want to be respectful of your time, and I really appreciate you taking all this time to explain a lot of things to me. And I'm sure a lot of our audience members will appreciate it. I'm sure there's more we can uncover. I do have to ask this one question: what is jaggery?
So it's a byproduct of sugarcane. So sugarcane, right?
Yes,
So from sugarcane, there is this byproduct which is a very sweet, mash stuff which can become really hard, and once it is kind of hard, it could be reshaped with the heat to any shape, and it's a sweet thing, and it's a completely natural sweet, right? Which is a replacement of sugar. So it's a replacement of sugar. You can use jaggery in place of sugar. Jaggery is 100% organic and does not have the harmful effects that sugar brings onto the table.
great. I'm glad I got that question answered before I let you go. So, Abhinav, where can we find you? What LinkedIn, website, where else?
So you can find me at LinkedIn. I'm there, and you can find me or write to me at either at Abhinav at the rate zerocarbon.one or at info, which is much easier, info at the rate zerocarbon.one. Uh, or our website, you can just drop in a note there. Either ways, you can always find me, and I'll be kind of glad to connect. Or if you are in the Bay Area, I kind of half of the year I'm there, so we can drop a note. We could definitely catch up for a coffee or
I
something.
would definitely take you up on that offer if I was in the Bay Area. And for anyone who wants to maybe look at your product and try it out, I heard there's a special offer that you have.
Oh yes, so the part is that they can use so good to grow good, as a promo tool to kind of use it and get some awesome discounts in terms of using our platform.
Great. Really appreciate that. I'm sure that there will be some people that are really interested into seeing how this tool can change their entire organization. Again, Abhinav, I appreciate all the time that you took to come and speak with me today on the podcast. A lot more to unpack, I'm sure, but I think this is we'll leave it here for now. So again, everyone, that was Abhinav Kaushal, the founder and CEO of Zero Carbon One, a leader bridging corporate expertise with climate innovation and improving that bootstrap climate tech can scale with the right system and vision. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with someone who's passionate about climate solutions, ESG innovation, or building mission-driven companies that prioritize sustainable growth over venture capital timelines. You can learn more about Zero Carbon.one and connect with Abhinav on his LinkedIn, as well as his Instagram. As always, So Good to Grow Good is about scaling solutions that matter, and every story we share helps plant another seed of change. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep sowing good to grow good.